Good morning, dear friends. It is Erev Rosh Chodesh. It is the 29th day of Adar Beis, the last day. Let's hold on tight for all the simcha and wonderful messages of Adar. But the good news, of course, is that tomorrow will be Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first of Nisan, which continues to have the ever optimistic theme of redemption, optimism, even unearned. And so that's a good time and a good theme to be on. And of course, today is April 1st, whatever that means for Talmud Chabura. And we're studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. And at the moment, we are on 111A. And with Hashem's help, there's a good chance we will manage to be Messiahim. There's a good chance we'll manage to close out chapter 14 and begin chapter 15 of Masechah Shabbos. Again, we've been reading these last several days, perhaps weeks, the chapter called Shmoyne Shratzim, which started out talking about exactly that, the halachas associated with trapping, causing pigment, harming, wounding a sheretz. We talked about the distinction of different types of shiratzim. It was pointed out that last week that was the parsha of the week, so we actually referenced the psukim that we spent a good bit talking about. We then moved on to talk about salt water, brine, and the permissibility of creating it, which led us to talking about different uses of salt and the effect that salt has on different items and if one is permitted to do so. And then from there, we transitioned to talking more broadly about different medical remedies and the permissibility of creating them, taking them. And we even went in the Mishnah to enumerate specific types of food and drink that are part of a remedy or possibly have medical or healing properties. And we talked about different formula for determining if it may or may not be consumed. And of course, along the way, we spent a good bit of time talking about different ancient Talmud era remedies for different kinds of illnesses. And we discovered that the ingredients in ancient pharmaceuticals were diverse and quite interesting. And we also realized that medicine of that era comfortably blurred the line between the pharmaceutical and the more esoteric, perhaps we might call it a segula type remedies. There's a little bit of psychology or manipulation of the mind. We even talked about the possibility of a placebo effect in some of these treatments, or the scaring of an individual, or the screaming at them, or having them jump around. So it seems like medicine then incorporated and blended comfortably a variety of different healing traditions. And again, we said the book on the subject will be entitled Don't Try This at Home. But of course, it's part of the Torah, and we've just about finished that journey. Yesterday, we closed out our discussion talking about sirus, about castration and the prohibition of doing so to animals, to humans. We talked about, well, not yesterday, I'm sorry, 2 days ago. We talked about maybe even a person who their reproductive system seems to be on off. They too may be prohibited from further damaging or tampering with that system. We talked about evidence of a rejuvenation and other such subjects, which leads us all the way to a brand new Mishnah. I did tell you on Wednesday that I'll try to pull up an article or two on the matter of pet ownership and castration. So I just want to deliver briefly on that. So first I want to show you from Chabad.org, and they have a highly simplified, I didn't share the screen so you can't see what I'm looking at. Hold on, let me share the screen. So I'm going to share the screen, and we'll start with Chabad.org, which in this article, they give a fairly simple formula. They don't go into all the lumdus. I just want to show it to you. How about neutering or spaying? Are you allowed to neuter or spay? And I learned something new, which is that neutering is, I think, to males, and spaying, I think, is to females, or vice versa. The gift of life is sacred. It is written, and we read this 2 days ago in the Rashi. We opened up the pasuk, in your land you shall not make damage to an animal's reproductive organs. So the Torah prohibits damaging an animal's reproductive organs. It is, however, okay to purchase an animal that has already been, and I would put this into quotes, fixed by a non-Jewish vet.
Rabbi,
hold on. The article tells us, by the way, in case you think it's super simple, You can study this more at length in the section of Shulchan Aruch called Even HaEzer. And so here, the best solution is to get a pet that's already been prepared for ownership. Now, I don't think that's always possible because I don't know if they do it to puppies. I think they only do it at a certain stage in the animal's development. And so that might be a problem. So is Chabad.org saying that we should prioritize or try to get a rescue animal? I don't know, but I want to just show you they're all lengthy articles, and I want to try to.
Let me ask you a question. Can you take a dog to a non-Jewish vet? Tell him I'm giving you a gift. Yours. Do the neutering, then take it back. Then the guy, or
are you asking him explicitly?
Yeah, well, you can.
Menachem, the way we do a mortgage.
Or just do a shtar mechira, or
the way you do a mortgage.
Oh no, or chametz, sell your chametz, and
No, I was going to ask. You certainly wouldn't be allowed to tell the vet that the dog I want to buy has to be neutered, because that, in a sense, is telling him to do it. No. Hold
on. First of all, I think you probably could tell the vet that you want a neutered dog, because here you are not. Here you are not asking the vet to neuter the animal. You're asking the vet to provide an animal that's already been neutered. So I want to just show you, there's a few articles. This one is an easier format to read. So here, Dr. Hammer, figured we should prioritize the use of Bergen County.
Absolutely.
Honor Bergen County. Absolutely. So here is a halachic analysis about the spay and neuter by Scott Sears. I have to be honest, I don't know him. I do know that he is perhaps an attorney, and it looks like he's part of a program called Torah. But he gives a nice summary here, and he starts out by talking about that in many states actually mandate spaying and neutering. He describes in a graphic manner that I like to avoid how exactly the spaying and the neutering takes place. But here, and let's see if I can zoom in so we can see a little better, because the words are kind of small. So we'll zoom in a bit. So here, the source of prohibition. The Torah prohibits the sacrificial use of animals whose testicles are bruised, crushed, torn, or cut, and further prohibits one from castrating any animal. That's what it says. Tasu, don't do this. This prohibition applies to insects as well. And our Gemara understood that this is including humans alike. So he's literally giving us a beautiful summary of our Gemara.
Hold hands. Right. One hard.
Then the question comes that the context was about males. So the Torah verse forbidding, this is a question our Gemara asked, if you recall. The Torah verse forbidding sterilization does talk about males. The Sifra comments that this prohibition does not apply to females. The Rambam explains that although minat Torah you may sterilize female animals, it is prohibited midrabanan. So this is the Rambam. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rambam. The Vilna Gaon takes it a step further and says that the prohibition is even the prohibition is even biblically against sterilizing female animals. If you believe that female sterilization is only asur midrabanan, it's only prohibited rabbinically, there is greater room for kula, for leniency, when it comes to spaying female animals. So this is the summary. Everyone agrees, everyone agrees that midaraisa, you're not allowed to neuter male animals. There is a machloikas if the prohibition of spaying female animals is only midrabanan or even midaraisa, and the preponderance of the opinions are that it is midrabanan, but one should not do so.
Rabbi.
Yes, Rabbi.
We're going to have the same kind of problem to put an animal down when it's
maybe
old.
Yes, maybe no. It's interesting question. So here is the language of the Shulchan Aruch. Afsar lahafsid evrei hazara, one is prohibited from damaging the reproductive organs, whether it is an animal, etc. Whether kosher, unkosher, Israel and diaspora. Person does do this, they would receive a biblical set of lashes as a consequence for the sin. Even if they are just contributing or adding to an already not functioning reproductive system. And we actually read this 2 days ago. What about if you give a drink, which we get read in our Gemara? A woman may do so. Oh, we did this also. Hold on. Here, this is the text that I really wanted to show you. You're not allowed to tell a Gentile to castrate a Jewishly owned animal. But if the Gentile on his own did it, mutter. So a Gentile, so let's say, for example, if there is a state regulation that says that they send vets around the city, scooping up animals and doing the procedure, well, then that might be okay. But there is a consequence for a person who plays games. Umutar law says behema lekusi lemachsis schar. You may give an animal to a Gentile, even for a discount, knowing that the Gentile who owns it will certainly neuter the animal. The akuti adata dinafsheka of it, because the Gentile is doing it for his own best interest. Umutar limkar lekusim behemas v'tarnagom afal gav bevade hakusi koina oism l'sars. The Ramah says you are allowed to sell an animal to a Gentile, even at a discount, even knowing that they're going to do this to the animal. V'yesh oiser. However, there are opinions who prohibit it. You sell it to a Gentile, and he brings it to a vet. The kuli al mashari is certainly permissible. And then he says, even though maybe you're worried about the pain of animals, and Dr. Hammer, when I saw this, I thought of you, and you're wisely keeping the issue of Tzar B'Lechaim front and center. It has to do with refuah or other manners. This is not considered Tzar B'Lechaim, etc. So there we have the discussion. Here we have the discussion about animals. It sounds very simple. I want to go really fast. The Talmud. I'll give you 1 second. I'm sorry. I need to answer this call. 1 second. All right. They hung up, so I'll catch them later. All right. The Talmud records a machlokes. If a Gentile is prohibited to do sirus. Rashba Rambam ruled that a non-Jew is not commanded regarding castration. The Smaga, other poskim say that a Gentile is also prohibited. Why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant about how problematic it is to ask a Gentile or to set up a Gentile to do castration. For a Jew, the Talmud says a Jew who brings an animal to a Gentile to be sterilized is penalized. We saw this in the Shulchan Aruch. He has to sell it. The Shulchan Aruch says so explicitly. Possible workaround, and this is where we'll conclude. The Ramah says that although it may be forbidden to sell one's animal to a Gentile, if one knows the non-Jew will castrate the animal, there's a workaround that he could, if he knows that it's going to be a third party. We just read this. So, for example, if the Gentile brings it to a vet, it'll be permissible. So that's at least for selling. What about if you want to keep your animal? The Chazon Ish was once asked if you can sell your animal to a Gentile, instruct the non-Jew to have another non-Jew castrate the animal. Then the Jew would buy back the animal, as Dr. Stamler proposed. The purpose of this castration was to get around the penalty requiring one to sell their animal if they have their animal castrated, as well as to comply with the workaround of their mouth. Chazon Ish ruled that this practice was acceptable. So again, can you sell your animal to a non-Jew, have them get it castrated by another non-Jew, and then buy back the animal in a what Dr. Stalmer called a heter mechira, but I might just call it a mechira? Yes, the Chazon Ish says you may. Chaim Jachter notes of Teaneck, if I'm not mistaken, rules that this ruling was given for animals used for commercial purposes. Meaning, if you have a farm, and he points out that many poskim don't allow this for pets, in household pets. On the other hand, Rabbi Bleich is of the opinion that this practice is acceptable for household pets. You're not going to distinguish between commercial animals and household pets. So it's important to quantify the Chazon Ish's heter, and Rabbi Jachter points out that it's likely that he would not have applied this to other pets. Given the lighter strictures.
By the way, just very interesting about Rabbi Jachter. He's an Ashkenazi Rav. He's got Yori Yadin Yadin, and he became the Rav of the Sephardic community here. He became an authority in the Sephardic community here in Tina. And I have to tell Rabbi Adler that we actually used Kol Torah, and the Rabbi Adler was the Rav at I think Bernie, you went to Reno, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, he was Rabbi. He was Bernie's Rav. He's my neighbor.
Oh,
Right.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we're getting some mixed messages here. Given the lighter strictures around female species and claims of health benefits, Rabbi Shlomo Aviner, famous posek in Israel, allows Jewish veterinarians to spay females. Rabbi Vosner does not protest against having a non-Jewish vet perform the procedure, but he says one should. He doesn't advise it. Chief Rabbi Shlomo Amar contended that because it was a public safety concern of wild and ownerless animals, one can ask a non-Jewish veterinarian to spay and speuter both genders. That's very interesting. So Rabbi Amar seems to be, in a sense, the most lenient, and he felt that it was a broader public safety concern to have a non-Jew do it. The common practice, however, seems to forbid spaying and neutering animals. So Lamaisa, what do? I don't know, but it seems that the preferred method would still be, as Chabad suggested, to buy an animal that's already been processed. There are some heterim, there are some ways, and it's complicated. Rabbi Jachter himself, I think, in his article. Oh, I should mention one more thing. It seems like there are some new techniques that are even less invasive and possibly more comfortable from a halachic perspective. In closing, you're going to be surprised to see this. Rabbi Heinemann Shlita once asked Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. This is an article from the Star K. Heinemann is the placeik of Star K. So he wants to ask the great Rabbi Moshe if a person can have a non-Jewish vet spay their Jewish female animal. Rabbi Moshe Paskin, you shouldn't instruct the vet. He could tell the Gentile that he is personally prohibited, and he would like to transfer ownership and sell to the vet. And once the vet spays the animal, buy it back. Yeah. This is halachically permissible because of the principle of sveka. Heinemann says that a Jew can imply that he would want to buy it back when the procedure is done. He shouldn't say so beferish. You can give money before the sale, knowing that the money will be used towards a future sale, etc. So let's add this. Based on what we've read, there are varying opinions. The preponderance of poskim seem to be opposed to neutering animals. There are those who allow a Gentile to do so, but that seems to be the minority. It sounds like, based on Rav Moshe and Rabbi Heinemann, that perhaps it would be better to, if you have to neuter or spay your animal, you might be better off having a female animal than a male animal, because the prohibition, according to many poskim, is more severe for a female or for a male animal versus a female animal. We'll leave it at that. I don't think this discussion, this discussion is certainly not a halacha l'maisa discussion, but I hope you've got a sense and a flavor for the complexity of the matter that was brought up in our Gemara 2 days ago.
Well, today they use at times chemical castration with people who have a history of sexual attacks. So how do we deal with that? And let's say in Israel, for instance.
That's a very good question. I think we could probably we would certainly bring up the pikuach nefesh aspect.
Was that would be the kosikarin?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And the question is probably even more complex. Well, first of all, if there are non-Jewish societies that impose it, well, then you don't get a choice. That's why your question was about Israel. That's an interesting question. I'm sure there are sheilot teshuvot about it, and I'm certainly not qualified to weigh in on the subject at this moment. But it is interesting, and we can search among the contemporary sheilot teshuvot. I have a feeling it is addressed, at least to some extent. But now let's jump into the Mishnah. And Dr. Stamler, don't go anywhere. We need you. Hachoishesh b'shinav. A person has a toothache. Lo yigamea b'hiras hachometz. Don't sip or rinse with vinegar. Aval mitabelhu kidarko. You can dip your food into the vinegar and hope to experience the oral, all the wonderful things, all the wonderful gifts that vinegar contribute to your oral hygiene and wellness. Dr. Stammer, in a moment, we're going to ask you if this reflects your understanding of contemporary dentistry.
The only thing I would say regarding vinegar would be the same thing as lemon juice. It's quite acidic, so it would be detrimental to your teeth over time. It wouldn't be immediate, but would it bother you if someone has a toothache?
Would it help you if you have a toothache?
No, it says lo yagamea b'hen tachomet.
Halachically, one is prohibited from rinsing in order to.
It would not help you. It would definitely not help you. It would probably bother you.
All right, let's.
Rabbi,
yes.
we only have this discussion on Shabbos because of what Rav Steinsaltz says. The Mishnah itself does not refer to Shabbos.
What do you mean?
I see in Rav Steinsaltz that this is on Shabbos.
Correct.
Where in the Mishnah do we have a clue that we're talking about Shabbos or in general?
Because it's Masechet Shabbat, and so the whole discussion of the whole Masechta is in the context of Shabbos, right? On the contrary, if the discussion of the Mishnah is ever not about Shabbos, it's going to have to mention that we're talking about not on Shabbos. We're talking about the malachas of Shabbos.
Unless they felt at the time that it helped it as an anesthetic, which I doubted.
So let's see what the Mishnah said. Let's see the Gemara. The Gemara itself asks your question about the worthiness and the effective, if vinegar is effective or detrimental. So the Mishnah says, if you have a toothache, lo yigamea b'henas hachometz, don't rinse, gargle with vinegar. But if you really eagerly need the vinegar for your teeth or your ache, mitabel hu kedarka, you could dip your food in vinegar as you usually do in a meal. Then nisrap, and if you're healed, you're healed. Dr. Hammer?
I guess in those days they focused on vinegar. They didn't have a kiddush after davening. I mean, what's wrong with some schnapps to take care of pain?
Interesting.
Yeah, no, I said as an anesthetic. But let me read you, I just Googled it. So let me read you something interesting. Apple cider vinegar. This solution has antiseptic and anti-inflammatory qualities, and it's also acidic. This means it can kill bacteria that lead to toothaches. Soak a cotton ball in some apple cider vinegar and press it lightly onto the affected tooth.
Is this your medical advice, or this is Google's medical advice?
No, that's Google.
But so there's at least some type of vinegar that actually may.
It could be both an antiseptic, theoretically, I guess, and maybe an anesthetic.
Menachem,
I never used it in my office, and I never recommended it.
Menachem, the medical advice from the dentist is do nothing. Go to the dentist immediately.
Yeah, go to the dentist. And if you happen to be healed, gesundheit. Rashi mitabel kedarkoi machol yupita b'chometz. And as it appears, in the times of the Mishnah, it was common for people they didn't have hummus and baba genush and chatzilim and schug. They would dip their bread in vinegar. Certainly a person of more modest needs. If a person has pain in their loins, they should not smear to try to be healed with wine or vinegar. Rashi, a person doesn't apply wine or vinegar on their person unless it is for healing purposes. One may apply oil on the affected area, but not rose oil.
Rabbi,
Yes.
to Bernie's point, when it shows you which part of the body are more important, because here you do use wine. So obviously your loins are more important than your teeth.
I'm confused.
Bernie
I'm
understood.
confused.
But thank you. I'll buy it. I'll go.
Lo yasuch yayin. Don't smear with wine. Don't smear with wine. Because it heals. And otherwise you wouldn't apply it. Wine is a valuable commodity. It's meant for drinking and maybe healing. You can use oil, veloisham and vered, but not rose oil. Why? Rashi lefisha dam of yikarim. It's a very expensive substance. It's not commonly found. And the only reason why you'd be wasting it and pouring it on your person, on yourself, on an injury or on an achy area would be for refuah. And on Shabbos, you're not allowed to do refuah. What if you are a prince? And so you're accustomed to living a pampered, costly lifestyle. Then you may smear this very expensive oil on your injuries. Because very well-to-do royal people would use this rose oil even without an injury and even regularly during the week. And so on Shabbos, you see a royal, you see a prince smearing themselves with this rose oil, even though it costs, I don't know what it costs. You can do it. Then Rabbi Shimon says, you know what else? Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim. Every Jew is really a prince, and if they can get their hands on rose oil, they can use it. It doesn't say the Yiddish Shemama says, this is Rabbi Shimon says. So Rabbi Shimon is giving a halachic psak, asserting that halachically a Jew, I'm sorry, it's good. Here, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, after this one we're making a repair. Give me 1 second. But let's hold this thought. Call Yisrael b'nei malachim. 1 second. Hello?
I guess this is another reason why a lot of frum people don't have dogs or cats.
Yeah.
You need a whole Shulchan Aruch just to deal with them.
I think the reason Jews don't have it, especially in the Orthodox community, ultra-Orthodox, is because in the shtetl, usually the poets, the goy, usually had the dogs and would sick them on the Jews. So Jews do not have many. You won't find many dogs in Bnei Brak.
All right, sorry, folks, we're back. Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim. Therefore, any Jew can, if they can get their hands on it, use high grade, high quality oil, even though it is exclusively used for royalty. Any comments? Any thoughts? What do you say about this? They have a Jewish American princess.
Elitist, quite elitist.
You're saying this is an elitist
Yeah.
statement?
Yeah.
I mean, if a poor, destitute Jew reads this, it might hurt him in a sense.
Right.
It's saying royalty has nothing. What it's saying is royalty has nothing to do with economic means. It has to do with worthiness, and every person is worthy of being pampered. Whether they can be pampered is another question. But halachically, we're not going to differentiate between one group of Jews and another group of Jews. They have to treat them all with the same standard, at least halachically. We're not going to actually say that you have to distribute to every Jew rose oil, but every Jew is worthy and therefore entitled to use it on Shabbos, notwithstanding their socioeconomic conditions.
We have something similar in rulings for a Beis Din that you cannot give advantage to poor people or even widows. You have to judge accurately.
Yeah, so the Torah says you cannot treat a person in any way other than in the fairness of law, even if they are impoverished or very well-to-do. You have to treat them equally under the law. That is true. All right, let's see the Gemara. Rami le Ravacha Aricha, Ravacha Aricha, the Torah Ravacha asked the Hu Ravacha Bar Papa, when we say Ravacha Aricha, the Torah Ravacha, we're talking about Ravacha, son of Papa, who asked for the Rabbi Abahu a challenge to our Mishnah. Tanan, the Mishnah says, our Mishnah, if you have a toothache, you're not allowed to gargle or swash with vinegar. Limemra, this seems to indicate the chaymetz malav that vinegar is good for teeth. But there's a verse which indicates there's a verse that says that smoke is bad for your eyesight, vinegar is bad for your teeth. So is vinegar good for your teeth, or is vinegar bad for one's teeth? More answers like kasha. Actually, it's not really a contradiction. Why? One, when we say in the pasuk that it's bad for you, we're talking about the vinegar that comes from unripened fruits. Rashi. So there are certain kinds of vinegar that are bad for your teeth. Whereas our Mishnah is talking about regular vinegar, which was known in that time to have benefits to your teeth. An alternate answer, which will parse this differently. The pasuk, the Mishnah, the contradictory references to the benefits or detriment of vinegar on your teeth are hadaika maka, hadaleika maka. When do we say that vinegar is good for your teeth? You have an injury that needs treatment. If there's no injury, you're simply applying acidic, corrosive, damaging substance to your teeth. Rashi, leika maka marpi. So first of all, ika maka masi. If there's an injury, so then it heals. Leika maka, but if your teeth are doing well, marapi, it causes your teeth to be weak or loosened. Rashi, leika maka marpi. You're causing the teeth to become loose, and it damages or slowly undoes your teeth, whatever exactly that looks like. Bottom line, well, that's how Rashi has it. But the bottom line is that vinegar, like many things, can be beneficial if you need it, but they have side effects that you don't want to just simply constantly expose your teeth to raw, undiluted vinegar. As a matter of fact, there are people, I remember where I know this, I was talking to somebody about the health benefits of drinking or gargling apple cider vinegar. And I think those who do consume apple cider vinegar, which you have to get past the taste, which is not pleasant. So I think you have to dilute it with water. And I think people say to drink it with a straw so that it doesn't come in contact with the teeth, which could cause the teeth to deteriorate or be adverse.
I think some people use it as a vitamin to get for diabetes.
Right, or for GI. I'm sure if we would Google the benefits of apple cider vinegar, we'll find the person selling it telling you that there are thousands of benefits to apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, weight loss diets recommended.
Yeah, it's good for everything. Okay. So here we have the first question. Is vinegar good or bad for you? And the answer is, it depends. Either which type of vinegar or the circumstances that are leading for you to be slurping vinegar. The Mishnah says, don't sip, drink vinegar. There's a brisa that says, don't sip and spit out. Don't rinse and spit. You're allowed to gargle and swallow. Why not? Rashi says, if you spit it out, obviously you're not trying to eat it. You're simply trying to heal yourself. But if you swallow it, no one notices. Abaya gives an answer. You know what our Mishnah is talking about? The prohibition of gargling with vinegar. We're talking about in a scenario where you're going to spit it out afterwards. That's how Abaya answers. So our Mishnah says, don't drink. We mean don't drink and spit out. You're allowed to drink. Don't take in, but you could swallow. Rava says no. Our Mishnah could even be talking about a person who doesn't spit it out. The distinction is before eating the meal, and I struggle to understand this. Rashi, before you have your meal, you're allowed to drink or even slur. What's the word? You're allowed to swirl. What's the word? Dr. Stam, help me out. You're allowed to rinse your mouth with vinegar, even if you're going to spit it out. People used to dip their food in vinegar every day. And when he sees the person handling vinegar, he says, oh yeah, he's dipping his food in the vinegar. But once he's done with his daily dose of vinegar and food, because the meal's over, we know that the person has no longer a mealtime need for vinegar, and then it is obvious that what's happening here is medical treatment or dental treatment. The Gemara says, there's a problem because there's something called hoyo. Halachically, on Shabbos, we don't want to break up the day and say, you know what, there's an act that's permissible sometimes and prohibited other times. If you're ever allowed to consume vinegar on Shabbos, you should be extended a license to do so throughout Shabbos. The Shaminon Leila Rava believes in hoyo, being that this is a permissible activity on some time in Shabbos, it by extension must be permissible throughout Shabbos. Let's read a little bit of a Rashi. Shabbos is 1 unit of time. There shouldn't and isn't such a thing as an activity that is prohibited sometimes on Shabbos and permissible other times. The Hashaminon L'Rava Beperek Yotes Meseches Beya. Sorry, Beperek Yontif Meseches Beya. In the tractate of Beya, the Amar Gabi Tefila Hoyel V'Chihai Gavna Dektoni Hasam the Ein Matfil and Kalim B'Shabbos V'Adam Tayv L'Amirin and Kalim My Time Alam Rav B'Nei Shnei K'Masak and Kliya V'Adam Nirek and Meikar when Tina B'Shabbos Asher Yechitz B'Yam Kippur Mel Yechitz V'Kol Yed Devil Hu Masak and Atzmai Merhod Ekem Megzar Atom Masak and Artzi Amarav Aleika Midi the Easter Shabbos B'Shabbos Lishtri V'Yam Kippur that's over Hoyel B'Shabbos Lehavim L'Misra V'Yam Kippur. I'm like, okay, long story short, Rashi basically quotes an entire segment of the Gemara, which is interesting, and the point is the Gemara over there talks about going to mikvah on Shabbos and on Yom Kippur, and Rav is of the opinion that Shabbos and Yom Kippur have to have the same halachic treatment. And so if something's permissible on Shabbos, it is permissible even on Yom Kippur. And similarly, if something is permissible on a part of Shabbos, it by extension must be permissible throughout Shabbos. And the Hebrew or Talmudic phrase for this is hoyel. Hoyel, since it is permissible sometimes, it must be permissible all the times. Rava made this assertion. There is nothing besides for eating that is permissible on Shabbos and prohibited on Yom Kippur. If it's permissible on Shabbos, it's permissible on Yom Kippur. And here too, in the case of sipping vinegar, since it's permitted to sip vinegar before dipping food, it should be permissible even after dipping food. So we asked the question. Rava says there's a distinction. You see that? Between when you're drinking your vinegar, before the meal or after the meal. And then we said, hang on, Rava is the one who says you must be permitted to do so throughout the year. So you know what the Gemara concludes? Hadar bein Rava mehach. Rava certainly would have taken back, changed his opinion. And he would have allowed dipping constantly, swishing vinegar. He would allow it constantly so long as you swallow it, just as Abaya answered. Gemara says, how do you know that he retracted his position and says that you're allowed to do the vinegar treatment all Shabbos? Maybe he changed his mind and no longer says hoyel. Maybe he no longer says that something that is permissible part of your Shabbos should be permissible the entire Shabbos. The Gemara says, Loi salka daitach. This is not a reasonable way to understand the Gemara. The Tanya kol chayava yitzvila is tevlin kedarkan in betisha b'beimi yom kippurim. Because Rava, and again, I've been avoiding the nuanced discussion about the mikveh, the Shabbos and Kippur mikveh question. But the bottom line is that we have a brisa that explicitly teaches that you're allowed to go to mikveh on Yom Kippur, and therefore Rava is more likely to retract.
Rabbi,
hold on, he's more likely to retract his position as it pertains to being allowed to swallow and to spit out on certain times of the day, and therefore Rava gives a blanket license and a blanket prohibition. You're allowed to swish and swallow. You're not allowed to swish and spit out. And most likely, Rava is going to have to embrace Abaye's explanation because Rava no longer can uphold his position that there are different behaviors, or there is a behavior that is permissible sometimes on Shabbos and not on other times. Rebbe, go ahead.
I'm troubled by going so quickly that everything permitted on Shabbos permitted Yom Kippur. Just like that, throw a line out. Not so simple.
Rebbe, the point is where it's really a side point that's being introduced from another Gemara. So I'd rather not go into it. I know there are specific Yom Kippur behaviors that are prohibited. That is true. But let's avoid that because it's totally off topic, and it won't be off topic when we get to Masechet Beitza or Beya, Be'ezrat Hashem, sometime in the coming our upcoming journey through the Talmud.
But we are allowed to eat on Shabbos.
Correct.
We are not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur.
For this reason and many other reasons, I'm attempting to sidestep the subject just because it's a whole sugya that is addressed in the Gemara and Beya, and we'll have to open it up and study. And it's easier just to borrow the data that's relevant without fully.
But Rabbi, what's the point of bringing that up here? That's what I'm trying to figure. I understand.
Because Rava has a position that when it comes to malacha, we're not talking about eating because that's a different issue. That's inoi. When it comes to malacha, prohibited activities are identically permitted or prohibited between Shabbos, Yom Kippur and Shabbos. And if something is allowed on Shabbos, it's going to be allowed on Yom Kippur. And Rava would certainly use the same principle, referred to as oyel, to say that if you're allowed to do an activity on part of Shabbos, you most certainly would be allowed to do that same activity on a different part of Shabbos. And therefore, Rava stakes the position that you should be allowed to, we're not going to create two different rules for the purposes of vinegar treatment of your teeth. There are other questions that could come up. But we'll bench them for now. Yeah, for now we'll put aside. But there are some other good questions that we could come up with to challenge this whole story. But for now, I want to make this siyum, and I don't want to hold it. So we're like 3 paragraphs I think away. Anyways, we'll see. Okay. We then said if a person has other wounds, and you're allowed to apply oil, not wine, not vinegar, not rose oil, and then Rav Shimon says you can. Amar Rabbi Abba bar Zabda Amar Rav. Rabbi Abba bar Zabda, quoting Rav, taught as follows. Halacha ki Rabbi Shimon. We follow the law of Rabbi Shimon. What did Rabbi Shimon say? Any Jew may apply rose oil. Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim heim. Every Jew is royalty. That is his assertion. Memra the Rav ki Rabbi Shimon severely. Are you telling me that Rav views and embraces Rabbi Shimon lekula? Let's see Rashi. B'koyle Shabbos severely Rabbi Shimon. Does Rav really ever follow Rabbi Shimon lekula? V'avar Rav Shimi bar Chia mishmei de Rav. Didn't Rav Shimi give over the name of Rav? Hi, Misachraya de Noz Yasa. Didn't he paskin that there's a garment that they would put over the plug that they would stuff into a barrel? And you're not allowed to do it because they would do it because it would be like putting, what do we call today? You have those rubber gasket. Is it a gasket? Something. We put like something to really, anyways, they would put a piece of material around the plug to really make it watertight.
Like a washer.
Like a washer, yeah.
Gasket, yeah.
But he said, Asr lahaitka b'yom hatava. You're not allowed to do so on Yontif or Shabbos because of schita, squeezing out liquid from a garment. And so we see that Rav errs on the side of Chumrah, not Kula. So why would he paskin like Rabbi Shimon Lakula? Why would Rabbi Shimon permit this? Because Rabbi Shimon is the one who says, Eina miskavin mutar. An activity, a malacha, which is not your desired result, your desired intention, is permissible. Why are you putting the shmata into the stopper of your barrel? Not to squeeze out a little bit of liquid from the material, only to make it water, to make it really tight and well-fitting. So Rabbi Shimon, the Gemara says, even though usually Rabbi Shimon says that Eina miskaven potter, and therefore we thought we saw Rav pasking against Rabbi Shimon. In this scenario, even Rabbi Shimon would agree that you're not allowed to put that cloth in on Yontif. Let me just remind you real fast. Rabbi Shimon is the one that says we look at what you desire to accomplish. If you didn't desire the result, you are potter. Rabbi and Rava explained there is an exception. That exception is psik reisha, when the result is absolutely going to happen. It is entirely scientifically unavoidable. And therefore, we don't have a scenario, we do not have an instance where Rav is clearly rejecting Rabbi Shimon. We actually have a scenario where Rav and Rabbi Shimon are in accordance to one another, certainly based on the understanding of Abaye and Rav. Don't we have a statement of Rav saying that the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda? So how do we see over here that Rav would paskin like Rabbi Shimon, allowing even a regular Jew to use rose oil? Don't we think that Rav and Rabbi Shimon don't agree? Again, that what? If you do an activity and you don't intend for the results, you're still chayiv. He says, Allah Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're chayiv, and not Rabbi Shimon. So Rav and Shmuel frequently have debates in halacha, and here we're saying that Rav embraces the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Eino miskaven aser, and Shmuel follows Rabbi Shimon, Eino miskaven mutar. Bar Avin taught the same thing, but without the original authors. Rav Amar Lach Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel Amar Lach Rabbi Shimon. So how do you say here that Rav and Rabbi Shimon agree? Rava said, "Ani v'arisha b'chabura." Me and the greatest of our colleagues. Tir Gemina explained as follows. And who was he talking about? Rabbi Chia bar Avin. So Rava and Rabbi Chia bar Avin explained, Halacha Rabbi Shimon v'lav mitame. Rav paskins technically in accordance to what Rabbi Shimon asserted, but they don't really agree. We could both say practically something is okay, but the theory behind the halacha is different. So although Rav and Rabbi Shimon happen to say the same thing, don't think that Rav is embracing the perspective of Rabbi Shimon. Simply, the technical results are the same. That they both permit using rose oil on Shabbos. What does it mean? Halacha Rabbi Shimon v'lav mitameh. Even halacha Rabbi Shimon d'shari v'lav mitameh. Are we saying that we say you're allowed to use rose oil, but not for his reasoning? Because Rabbi Shimon says that rose oil has medical benefits, and Rav says that it's not beneficial. That doesn't make sense. Because why would Rav say that it doesn't help? The fact that we say that well-to-do people use this oil, obviously it has remedies. What we mean is that you're allowed to use the oil. Why? And folks, pardon me if I'm going through it fast. I think at the end it all makes sense. Rabbi Shimon says nobody can get their hands on rose oil, but we'll still allow every Jew to use this rare commodity because they're royal. Rav says no. A commonly available item may be used by everyone. If it is rare, you may not use it. But in Rav's town, everybody, you go into the dollar store and you could find rose oil. So Rav said, in my town where rose oil is not a rare commodity, it is a common luxury that everybody can use. You go into the dollar store, the shoe store sells it, the sushi, everyone's selling rose oil behind the counter. So then you're allowed to use it. But hypothetically, in a situation where there is no rose oil or it is very rare, Rav would say that it is not permitted to be used. And this concludes our Gemara. So really, really fast, just to recap, super fast. We have a Mishnah that talks about rinsing your teeth and then using other substances on other parts of the body. What we conclude is wine and vinegar cannot be used in the body. Oil can be used on the body, and rose oil may not be used in the body according to the first opinion, but Rav Shimon says you can use rose oil. The Gemara wants to understand something because we have Rav saying that you're allowed to use rose oil. And we don't understand that because Rav and Rabbi Shimon rarely agree. And we took a little bit of a survey, finding that Rav does not embrace the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And our answer was, Rav happens to say the same words as Rabbi Shimon, that you can use the rose oil, but the reasoning is very, very different. And so the halachic, the philosophy of the law, they are diametrically opposed. The reason why their statements align is because reality on the ground is different. Rabbi Shimon says rose oil is rare and anyone can use it. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I just walked around town and everybody's trying to get rid of it. We can't get rid of the rose oil, and therefore you're allowed to use it because it is nothing special, nothing exclusive, and everyone can wear it. So ironically, we have Rabbi Shimon saying, Kol Yisrael b'nei Melachim, and Rav says, I don't buy that theory, but Lamaisa, practically, use the rose oil gesundheit. And I think a good analogy would be toilet paper 2 years ago and toilet paper 3 years ago. 3 years ago, everybody could use toilet paper. It's not considered a luxury or something of extra special commodity. And then, of course, 2 years ago, toilet paper became an extremely rare, valuable, and inaccessible commodity. We'll say, you know who uses toilet paper generously? Very well-to-do people that have a trailer full of. So, anyways, that concludes today's Gemara session.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Are we not opening the usual can of worms if all of a sudden one of the criteria is the stuff available or not available, expensive or not expensive? We can go back to every single thing and say, you're saying this because in your town there's none, in my town there's plenty.
No. There's a simple principle. Something that is easily available, everyone uses it, not only in the context of healing.
No, but Rabbi, again, we can't just say it because there'll always be somebody like Rava who's going to say, in my town we don't have any of this. So
No. Rava didn't say. Rava didn't say in my town everyone uses it. The fact was that everyone used it, and therefore, in other words, what is our Gemara telling us? Something that everybody uses as a common amenity. So its use or application is not evidence of medical treatment. That's allowed.
No, but Rabbi, my question is not that. Why dafka here? Why only in this point? Why only about vinegar or whatever, rose oil? What about all the other things before?
Because the other things before, the reason why they were taken or not taken had to do with taste or the reason to use it. So we talked about all different kinds of funky, foul-tasting, weird foods, which are only used for medical purposes. So there, even if it's highly available, even if there was 1 million white mules around town, you're still not going to be poking through their dung and chomping on the unprocessed barley. So we don't need to say, oh, is it available or not? There, the premise is different. But the essential idea is, could do regular, normal people consume this for reasons other than medicinal purposes? If the answer is yes, it may be done. If the answer is no, it may be not. And that is the principle that comes out of our Gemara, certainly from the perspective of Rav. And just to be more clear, our Gemara debates one narrow question. When it comes to a food that's only advantageous for health purposes, so then it's obvious that you're doing it for health. If it's eaten otherwise, it's not obvious. When it comes to the question of the value, there is where we have yet a debate. Do we look at do we consider the common use that's born out of cost or not? Rabbi Shimon says we don't. The Mishnah otherwise asserts, the Tanakama asserts we do. Rav says, yeah, actually we do consider. If you're taking gold flakes, probably, I don't know how, I don't want a gold flake, not a gold flake, the gold foil. So if it's, well, anyways, I'll stop there. But I think that's the point. My dear friends, I want to wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. I hope to have the privilege to resume studying the Gemara and starting a new chapter 15 on Monday. So again, Sunday there will not be a shir, but on Monday with Hashem's help we'll resume. My dear friends, my wishes to everyone to have a wonderful Shabbos. We pray for peace in the world and good health for all of Klal Yisrael, and particularly the dear members of our